Primary mission of the church, to put God's love in people's heart. If you think that I'm misreading some of this stuff, that there's not a false gospel, that Satan is counterfeiting the truth of what Christ has accomplished in healing, let's read the bottom of Tuesday's lesson. Tuesday's lesson says, theologians sometimes use the word expiation to talk about how this atonement works. Latin root expiare means to atone for, and the idea involves reparations for a wrong deed. Someone did something wrong. He or she violated the law, and justice demands a penalty to pay for that wrong. In English, it is sometimes said that the guilty person owes a debt to society because of what he or she did. In our situation, we sinned, but in the plan of salvation, the atonement, Christ's sacrificial death, relieves us from the legal consequences of that wrongdoing. Instead, Christ himself paid the penalty for us. The punishment that legally, yes, God's government has laws, should have been ours, was given to Jesus instead. That way, the demands of justice were met, but they were met in Jesus instead of us. Though we are sinners, though we have done wrong, we are pardoned, forgiven, and justified in his sight. This is the crucial foundational step in the restoration of all things. I'm going to tell you, it's complete fraud, it's a lie, it's a distortion, it's a disgrace. Everything said here is just false. It's based on a false law construct and a false diagnosis. Now, let me be clear. So could we be saved without the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ?
No.
Absolutely not. I want to be very clear. Christ's death was essential for the salvation of humankind. It just was not essential for this legal malarkey. This legal, contrived human construct. Do you understand? Everything said here is based on the idea that God's law functions no different than the United States, than ancient Rome. A system of imperial rules that when you break it, you must use authority to inflict punishment upon. It puts God in the role of acting like a sinful being. That's the problem. These are not God's laws. They've got the wrong law, and if you get the wrong law, you get the wrong definition of everything. Yes, Russell.
Let's start calling this what it is. It's a doctrine of devils. It has as its author Satan himself. Okay? It's not merely a distortion. It's not merely corrupt. It is a doctrine of devils.
And Revelation actually describes this, I believe.
Okay, don't let me sugarcoat it.
I believe actually the Revelation describes this as the wine of Babylon.
Yes.
In which all the world is intoxicated upon, because the entire world, essentially every religion of the world, views God through this imposed law construct and reacts to it. And they react in several ways. And by the way, if you get your mind around how reality really works, people who have been indoctrinated with an imperialistic Roman dictator God who sits up there angry and wrathful must be appeased by the blood of his son. If you don't claim that legal penalty, then he will torture you in hell, either as long as you deserve it for all eternity. And they go, I reject that. And they move away from that entire arbitrary legal construct, and they move instead into nature and science and begin living principles in harmony with us. They've actually, even though they've rejected God, become closer to God.
Amen.
And if you have family members that you know that have rejected God, recognize they have moved toward him, not away from him. Yes?
This is not a viable alternative.
No, this teaching.
Right.
It doesn't work.
We were criticized in times past for rejecting a viable alternative.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And as we go through, I want to unpack really operationally, guys. We're going to unpack in here today why. You will see why this does not work, why it cannot work. I'm going to go through a couple more quotes. This is education, because I want you to understand clearly God's law. What is God's law? We've described it before, but here's a quote out of Education, page 99. The same power that upholds nature is working also in man. The same great laws that guide alike the stars and the atom control human life. The same great laws. You mean there's a law out there that the planets have to react to in honoring their mother and father? There's a rule? No, the same great laws. Let's keep going. The laws that govern the heart's action, regulating the flow of the current of the life of the body, are the laws of the mighty intelligence that has the jurisdiction of the soul. From him, all life proceeds. Only in harmony with him can be found its true sphere of action. For all the objects of his creation, the condition is the same. a life sustained by receiving the life of God, a life exercised in harmony with the Creator's will. To transgress his law, physical, mental, or moral, is to place oneself outside of harmony with the universe and introduce discord, anarchy, and ruin. Did you hear what kind of law is this? What do you hear being described? All right, here's another one. Think about this one. See if you hear law being described in this passage. And if so, I want you to tell me what laws you hear being described. This is out of Signs of the Times, June 12, 1901. One of the divine plans for growth, do you want to grow? Do you want to develop? Do you want to advance? Do you want your mind to get stronger? One of the divine plans for growth is impartation. What's impartation mean? Giving. Okay? The Christian is to gain strength by strengthening others. He that waters shall be watered himself. This is not merely a promise, it is a divine law. A law by which God designs that the streams of benevolence, like the waters of the great deep, shall be kept in constant circulation, continually flowing back to their source. In the fulfilling of this law is the secret of spiritual growth. What kind of law was just described here?
Natural law.
A design law, a natural law, exactly. Not an imposed rule. And how would you describe it? If you notice, there are actually several different laws. If you're listening carefully, there were several laws of God, design laws, all harmoniously working together in that statement. And if you understand the vision of Ezekiel, when Ezekiel chapter 10 has a vision of God's throne, and what's a throne symbolically represent? Government, rulership, right? And in his vision, the throne of God is resting upon something. It's sitting on something. What's it sitting on? A rotating wheel inside a rotating wheel, a moving circle inside a moving circle, which is pictorially describing the harmonious movement action of giving, the law of love, and all the laws working together in perfect harmony. And God's government is built in this design protocol. And so what do we hear in this quotation? We hear, one, the law of love, which is the principle of giving. We hear that clearly there. But also the law of exertion. If you want something to get stronger, you must exercise it. You must exercise it. Can you become a strong, competent, powerful, world-class musician by listening to the stereo 8 hours a day? But I listen to music 8 hours a day. Can you become a strong thinker by listening to sermons 8 hours a day? The mature, Hebrews 5:14, are those who've developed by practice the ability to discern the right from the wrong. You must exercise your God-given intelligence. The law of exertion. There's also the law of worship. By beholding, we're changed to what we admire, esteem, and look at. And the law of truth. The truth heals and sets free. It displaces those lies. Here's another quote. You tell me what laws are being described in this quote, that I may know him, page 194. It is a divine law that blessings come at some cost to the receiver. Those who would become wise in the sciences must study. And those who become wise in regard to Bible truth, that they must impart that knowledge to others, must be diligent students of God's holy word. There is no other way. They must search the scriptures diligently, interestedly, prayerfully, and after all their research, there is beyond an infinity of wisdom, love, and power. What law is being described here? Law of exertion. You must study. Just what I said about the music. You can't get musical skill without practice. You can't get intellectual skill without practice, without thinking, without exercising. This is why Paul says in Romans, every person must be fully persuaded in their own mind. My goal, and I've said it in here many, many times, haven't said it in a few months, I'm not here to tell anybody what to think. I'm here to stimulate you, to put ideas in there that you go, whoa, and you're going to go home and wrestle out, and you're going to look at the evidence up, and you're going to study it out for yourself. Just like a piano teacher will show you, but then you go home and you practice. You have to practice before that becomes yours. This is why every false religion of the world indoctrinates people. They give them a system of beliefs, and they don't want them to think, They don't want them to reason. They don't want them to expand their knowledge. They want them to hold fast to the standards. Hold fast. Reject anything that's different. Yes.
You use the phrase, and then it becomes yours when you go home and practice.
Yes.
So what we need to remember is that when we assimilate these ideas, it's incorporated to us as individuals, and we need to present them as our ideas and not necessarily quote other people. I think there's an ownership that we need to take, and rather than say, well, so-and-so said, whatever, it needs to be yours.
Yes, and that can only happen when you actually are a competent practitioner of the art. You follow me? Remember, as a medical student, we'd go in and say, well, my staff supervisor said this, right? And that's how we do. We have confidence because we trust. And the patient would feel better because we're a medical student, right? But at some point, it becomes ours, and we're the one who said, no, this is here, and let me explain why, and this is what we're going to do. And you explain the reason because now you understand how reality is working, and you can explain that. What do you think of this one? Desire of Ages 759. How does it fit into everything we're saying? God could have destroyed Satan and his sympathizers as easy as one casts a pebble to the earth, but he did not do this. Rebellion was not to be overcome by force. Compelling power is found only under Satan's government. The Lord's principles are not of this order. His authority rests upon goodness, mercy, and love. And the presentation of these principles is the means to be used. God's government is moral, and truth and love are the prevailing powers. Remember we read earlier about all the power of the Father, the Son, and you're putting these pieces together, your mind's seeing how it works. Because what can you not get with threats and coercion? Even if you have the most physical power in the universe, if you use physical power to intimidate people, do you get love from them?
No.
Do you get trust? Do you get loyalty? Do you get devotion? No. Yes, God's all-powerful, but he never uses that to his ends. It's only truth and love. Yes?
How can it not be any more clear than that passage?
Because people are operating under level 4 thinking, and they don't understand God's design law. And under level 4 thinking, I understand why the opponents do what they do. If that's the way reality works, if reality is there's a law, God made it up, there's no inherent consequence, he has to maintain sovereignty or else his whole government collapses, so he has to punish the lawbreaker. That's where they're at. They just don't understand reality. They're in a false paradigm. They're actually in fantasy land. Seriously, it's fantasy. It's not reality.